Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, sponsored by DeLucia and DeZomba Insurance. It's cyber liability, what you need to know, and also with a little bonus at the end about the Chamber Choice Insurance Program. So my name is Brian Schill, and I'm the Executive Director for the PT Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us. Our presenter today is Al DeLucia. Good morning, Al.
Morning, Brian. Morning, everyone.
Good, good. Little Zoom 101. This is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and social media for your viewing pleasure. We may have time for questions today, which I'm sure we will. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A button rather than the chat. And that's the Q&A button. So, Al, it's showtime. Take it away.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I know you're busy today, so try to move this along. I want to thank Brian Schill and Amy Petro from the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce for giving me the opportunity to put this webinar on. As Brian said, the webinar is, we're going to cover cyber liability and also employment practices liability, kind of at a high level, just a little bit about what you need to know and how you and your clients can protect themselves. So first thing is that, hang on here. Now, okay, Brian. There we go. Okay. First thing you need to know about cyber liability is the threat is real. Cyber crime is the fastest growing criminal act in the world. Matter of fact, October is Cyber Security Awareness Month. That's the first time that October has been named as Cybersecurity Awareness Month because the cybercrime is just escalating. Since 2015, cybercrime is up 150%, and it's up over 35% just in the past year. And you think about, is there any threat to my business? Well, if your business uses email, if you accept credit cards, if you use social media, if you have any type of sensitive customer or employee data, then the threat is real for your business and the need for cyber liability is real. A couple of common misconceptions about cyber liability and cyber crime. Number one, that hackers go straight for their main target. They don't. Normally, hackers are going for a smaller target to get to a larger target or just to go to the smaller target. One of the more publicized cyber liability hacks was the Target hack a couple of years ago. Well, they didn't go to Target's hardware and cyber information to get into their system. They went in through a subcontractor. They actually went in through a subcontractor that was working in one of their stores and went in through their laptop to get into Target's system. The other thing is hackers are the same as identity thieves. They're not. Hackers are the people that steal the information. Identity thieves are the ones they sell that information to, and then the identity thieves use that information to do whatever they're going to do, whether it's to take money fraudulently or to send viruses and ransomware. Another misconception is that data breaches are immediately obvious. They're not. Sometimes they can take days, sometimes they can take weeks to uncover the idea that the data has been breached and we've got customers and maybe employees with their information at risk. And the data breaches most often happen to large companies. Those are the ones that are most well publicized, but the data breaches to small companies is up significantly. Just in 2021, it's up 40% for companies that have 25 and less employees. So the idea that it only happens to big companies is definitely a misconception. couple of ways that you can be hacked and your information can be at risk: through social engineering, funds transfer fraud, ransomware, network interruption, data breach, security, network security, and media liability. Social engineering, this is where you have an employee that's tricked into sending money to somebody that they're not, and it could be a company manager, a customer, a vendor. I know secondhand of two instances that happened. My son worked for a well-known financial firm in the city of Pittsburgh for a number of years, and they had a client that was always emailing to say they wanted to transfer money within their account. It was a wealth management firm he worked for, and they would always confirm that it was this client who was sending that email, and then once confirmed, they would transfer that money. Well, one time, they got an email that looked like it was from that client. The person who handled that in the transactions department didn't confirm with that employee and transferred money, and turned out that it wasn't that person. Looked very, very much like it was, but it was not. They didn't confirm with that client. They transferred the money out of their account into another bank account. That money was gone, and unfortunately, the employee that did that lost their job. So it was a fairly significant transfer of funds, and it was because it looked like the person that they thought that was the customer, but it wasn't. So it's very easy for emails to look genuine, to look like it's from the person you've been dealing with, but you always want to make sure that that it is, because social engineering is on the rise. Funds transfer fraud. This is where a hacker gets in, breaks into the computer system, gains access to your online banking account, and requests a transfer of funds. I had this happen to one of my clients. They caught it, and the only reason they caught it was what they did was they got into my client's computer system, and they requested all of the employees' payroll direct deposits to be changed to one bank account. And this is an employer that had 35 employees. And the only reason they caught it was because the payroll service said, this just doesn't look right. All of a sudden, every employee that works for this company is changing their direct deposit from all of these different banks to this one particular bank. And so the payroll service called the employer and said, is this right? Are you doing business with a new bank? Or all your employees changing their direct deposit to this one bank? And of course, the answer was no. But if they had only done one or two or maybe three, it would have gone unnoticed. That payroll information and payroll money would have gone into that new bank account, which obviously was the hacker's bank account, and that money would have been gone. So they got greedy and got caught. But again, the threat is very real. Ransomware. This is where an employee unknowingly clicks on a link to an email, and now your computer has a virus. And not only is it from something that an employee or somebody working for you can do to your system, it's also something that they can do to a client's or a customer or a vendor system. If they share that or forward that email, it's easy for that ransomware to end up on somebody else's computer. And this is where, number one, the virus encrypts that network. So now the network is locked and the database is locked. Number two, now they reach out and say, you're going to have to pay us X amount of money to unlock the company's files. And then even if you do pay that money, or the insurance company pays that money, it's a long process to get your system back up and running again. It's not as simple as, they hand you a key and you just unlock your system and everything's the way it was. Normally the data is corrupted, so you've got to go through and get your data back in shape. You've been down for probably several days negotiating with them, that trying to pay the ransomware and getting the insurance company hopefully involved. And then It's a matter of making sure that your system is back up and running properly. So it's not as simple as just unlocking your system and everything is the way it was before you suffered a ransomware attack. And this is becoming more and more common. And what they're finding is, and what they're looking at is the paying of these ransomware ransoms by insurance company actually fueling more and more ransomware attacks? Because now the people who are doing it are finding, hey, this is profitable. We used to do ransomware on, say, contractors or manufacturers or wholesalers, and if they didn't have any type of cyber liability protection, now they're getting $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 because they don't have any insurance behind them. Now ransomware is part of cyber liability protection, and they're getting $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and the insurance companies and the government are looking at it and saying, is this insurance protection actually exacerbating the problem of ransomware? So it's really escalating right now. It's probably the biggest part of cyber liability crime right now. Data breach, this is where somebody gets into your system and can possibly steal personally identifiable information. And unfortunately, you don't know how extensive the data breach is until you go into further security review. You've got to bring in the computer people to see how much of our database has been compromised, how much of the personally identifiable information like name, address, social security number, driver's license number, maybe credit card numbers have been compromised. And then you've got to reach out to everybody that has been that their data has been breached and let them know that their data has been breached and is possibly at risk, and also then provide credit monitoring services for these people. So you have to set them up on a credit monitoring system, and then usually you're ending up paying the bill for those credit monitoring systems for possibly dozens or maybe even several dozen of your clients whose data has been breached. Network security. This is where hackers get in and flood your system with an unusual amount of traffic, normally emails. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to use your server as a launch for viruses, for spam emails, or anything else that they're trying to send out. I personally had this happen to me a number of years ago. I came into the office on one Monday, and our systems were running very, very slow. I shut our network server down, brought it back up. It was still running very slowly. I called our IT people. They came out and they said that our network server had been infected by a virus that was getting ready to transmit over 10,000 emails if we had let it. Luckily, our security system caught it. We were able to rectify this situation pretty easily. But if we had not had good network security, our system could have easily launched over 10,000 emails, many of which contained viruses and many of which would have gone to our customers. So luckily it was caught, but that's the type of thing that network security, being able to launch a virus, that's the way hackers can get into your system and affect your customers, affect vendors, employees. So that's another now, even though a lot of what is done today is cloud-based, there's still a lot of businesses that have some type of network system in their offices, in their companies, for the non-cloud-based systems that are shared, within the office. So just because a lot of things are cloud-based doesn't mean this still isn't a threat. Media liability. This is becoming more and more prevalent where, if a company is using some type of social media platform, a customer could possibly post something that there's a complaint about the service or maybe about one of the employees. An employee sees it and replies and accuses the customer of lying or accuses the customer of something worse. This is something that would be picked up by a cyber liability protection. It's becoming more and more common that cyber liability is responding to this type of activity because of the prevalence of the social media marketing, social media activities, promoting of businesses. So a couple of things you need to take into consideration about cyber liability and cyber liability protection. Number one is that most of what we just talked about as cyber liability threats are not picked up by a standard property or crime policy or even a liability policy. But cyber liability can provide coverage for the things we talked about, and what happens and what can be paid for by a cyber liability policy can be the loss of income because of your suspended or limited operations, or possibly even someone you passed ransomware onto or a virus onto. Notifying the affected parties of a data breach. Like I said, once you have a data breach, you have to inform the people that are in your system that have had their data breached. So you've got to inform them, and that comes at a cost. The reparations to customers or third-party vendors who suffered a financial loss due to your breach. If you have a vendor or a customer that you passed a virus onto and they had ransomware and they had to pay the ransomware, and they have to have the time to put their systems back into good working operation, they're probably going to come back to you and say, hey, we got this virus from you, we got the ransomware from you. It shouldn't be us that's responsible for paying for getting things back up and running. Recovering the compromised data is often very tough, especially when it comes to ransomware. Repairing your computer systems that have been infected by a virus. Bringing in your IT people to upgrade and patch your security systems. And then the cost of credit monitoring for your customers. So like I said, not only do you have to notify the parties that their data has been breached, but now you have to provide that credit monitoring service for them, sometimes up to at least a year because of the data breach in your system. Couple of things to keep in mind about cyber liability policies. They're not all created equal. There's a couple of things you want to be looking at if you're looking at adding or upgrading the cyber liability. Number one, when we talk about cyber, that can be a misnomer because there are some policies which are strictly cyber liability, meaning they're only covering electronic data and breach. So that would be cell phones, laptops, workstations, anything electronic. However, there's a lot of other ways that information can get stolen. It can be dumpster diving. It can be, an open file on somebody's desk. It can be somebody looked at a computer monitor and got information and wrote it down. So there's a number of ways that information can be stolen. It doesn't have to be just electronic. So you want to make sure that the policy you have in place for the protection isn't just cyber, it's any type of data breach and issues with privacy. The other thing is, the type of exclusions that a policy might have. There are some policies out there, they seem to be doing away with this, but there are still some that have it. They have exclusions for, it's not triggering a claim if this isn't in place. For instance, if you're using a device that doesn't have some type of malware protection on it, and you pick up a virus and then transmit it to a client. If you're using your cell phone to check your email, and then forwarding email on to clients. If your cell phone, if your system does not have malware, it's very possible that that cyber liability protection might not respond. So those are several things to keep in mind about the cyber liability. What you want to keep in mind is that the cyber risk is real, and it's getting more and more real every day. This is, like I said, this is the fastest growing crime in America right now. The criminal activity, it's amazing how premiums and insurance coverages are responding to these. But the cyber attacks, the data breaches, they're very common. Small businesses are becoming more and more the target, because the hackers realize that most small businesses have weaker security systems than larger targets. The larger targets, they're the ones that get the headlines, but the smaller businesses, and smaller being 25 employees and under, they're the ones who usually do not have a real good security system in place. With weak cybersecurity systems in place, unfortunately, they become a pretty easy target. Cyber liability and cyber attack is not just an inconvenience. It can significantly damage your business or even put you out of business, and it can definitely ruin your reputation as a business owner if you pass malware, or you pass a virus or ransomware onto one of your customers, and don't stand by and help them to recover from that. So the cyber insurance coverage can help your business recover from the financial losses. And like I said, it can pay for the credit monitoring, the attorney's fees, and a lot of other expenses. Second part of the webinar today is employment practices. Employment practices liability insurance, commonly known as EPLI, is again, this is a coverage, and this is a exposure that's been growing over the years. More and more small businesses are experiencing EPLI exposures and EPLI suits from employees, from former employees. If you hire employees, if you do employee evaluations, promote or fire employees, provide employee benefits, have employee interaction with coworkers, customers, third parties. All of these things have the exposure for an employment practices liability suit. There's a number of things that employment practices can protect a business from. Suits for workplace harassment, sexual harassment, wrongful termination, retaliation, breach of employment contract or employee agreement, invasion of privacy, discrimination, negligent or inaccurate HR decisions, and a violation of local or federal employee laws. It also can deal with the infliction of emotional distress or mental anguish, failure to employ or promote. A lot of people don't think about the idea that if you interview a candidate and you offer the job to somebody else, that's not even an employee or an ex-employee. This is somebody that you just chose not to hire. Those people can come back to your company and say, you failed to employ me when I was the best candidate, and bring a suit. Wrongful discipline or demotion, mismanagement of employee benefits, and defamation of character. All of these things are exposures to businesses when they have employees, and when they deal with employees. And these are things that we see more and more often as areas where employees and ex-employees are bringing suit against the companies. And it's not just large companies. Again, the large companies are the ones that get the attention, but it's more and more prevalent with smaller companies. The employment practices liability can provide protection for these things. Your standard general liability policy does not. There's a pretty strong exclusion in just about every liability policy saying anything related to these things that I just went over for employment practices liability is not picked up by the general liability, because years and years ago, all of these things were silent in a general liability policy, which meant that if it wasn't excluded, it was covered. And these type of activities were causing havoc with the general liability carriers and the claims that they were paying. So they decided that they had to break that out, carve that out of a general liability policy, and make a separate policy for those exposures, so it could be the right premium and the right underwriting could be done to cover those exposures. But it's something that small companies face more and more often. I usually see at least a couple of these every year, and every year from customers of mine who call me and say they've got a employment practices liability case, and it's almost always a small employer, maybe 8, 10, 12 employees. It's somebody that left maybe 6 months ago, a year ago. Now they come back and they say, hey, I was let go unfairly. I was never promoted. I never got a pay raise. It was a hostile work environment. I was harassed. There was sexual discrimination, and unfortunately, the business owner has to defend themselves. And these claims are very, very expensive to defend. The average defense cost, this is without any type of actual judgment payout, is a little over $25,000. So if you have a little, for instance, I have a small business owner that just recently received a notification that that they were being sued by an ex-employee for harassment, and they have 3 employees. It's probably going to take at least $25,000 to $30,000 to defend that client, and that's without any wrongdoing or finding of wrongdoing. That's without any judgment. If there's a judgment, that's probably going to be 3 or 4 times larger if there is an actual judgment against that business owner. So these, they're very common, and they can get very, very expensive. Why you need employment practices liability. Employee-related lawsuits are on the rise. This was one of the fastest growing areas of activity, of claims against employers in the last couple of years. Even good employers can get sued. I don't know how many times I've had clients or friends of mine who are business owners tell me, oh, my employees are like family. Unfortunately, relationships can sour, things can happen, and an employee doesn't feel like their employer's family anymore. Their employer has somehow not been treating them fairly, and can leave and decide that they're going to bring an employment practices liability suit against them. And it can be, like I said, from wrongful termination, sexual harassment, hostile work environment. There's a lot of other very, very similar issues. And normally, every time I've seen one of these, the employer has been surprised. The employer has been surprised that an ex-employee has brought some type of action. And it doesn't even have to be an ex-employee. It can still be a current employee. It can be an employee who, for instance, says to their manager, or maybe says to the business owner, we have a UPS person that delivers packages to our offices on a regular basis, and every time they come in, they say something inappropriate to me, and I'd like it to stop. And the manager or the business owner doesn't do anything about it, and that complaint goes unheard and unacted upon. And at some point, the employee says, I'm not being listened to, I'm going to quit, I'm going to find another job, or I'm just not going to take this. And they leave. And the reason being is that a third party is the one who caused that that problem. And that person could even bring that suit while they're still employed. So it doesn't have to be an ex-employee. So again, these are exposures that every business has that has employees. These are exposures that are very real. And unfortunately, if an employment practices liability claim is brought, they're extremely expensive to defend. So with that, I know that was a fairly high level view of both cyber liability and employment practices. As Brian said, if you have any questions, if you want to put it in the Q&A, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The last part of the webinar being, are you missing out on one of the biggest advantages of being a member of the chamber, whether you or any of the clients that you deal with, is the Chamber Choice Program. Chamber Choice Program for the business insurance for business owners. It's a great program. It's sponsored by the Chamber and also by Penn National Insurance. Penn National is an insurance company that writes business insurance for the type of businesses that are chamber members, members of the Peters Township Chamber and other members or other chamber members. And the way the Chamber Choice Program works is that by having your business insurance through that program, you're eligible for a dividend at the end of the year. And that dividend is normally somewhere around 8% per year, 8% of your annual premium. So if you have a small business owner that has a premium of $6,000, that average 8% could be about $480 of dividend check, and there's a check back directly to the business owner. So it's a nice program, a nice reward for being a member of the chamber. Peters Township Chamber is a participating member in this program, and it's something that many of the members of the Chamber of Commerce are in, and very satisfied with the business insurance provided by Penn National, but also being able to get that dividend back at the end of the year as a chamber member. So it's a great benefit of being a member of the chamber, and it's a great benefit for your clients, and it's a nice incentive for somebody to join the chamber. To be able, if they've got a reasonably good size business insurance premium, which a lot of businesses do, it could be a nice incentive for to be able to get that dividend program. So with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thanks, Al. I really appreciate it, especially with National Security, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It was very timely. I don't know about everybody else, but a couple things. There are several threats that you talked about, even the social media stuff that I was never aware of before. So if nothing else, my eyes are opened with respect to that. There is a question regarding storing passwords, and if you had any comments maybe related to that.
Storing passwords in one location or on the computer?
On the computer and things like that. So
yeah, I know that's easy, but that's something you really shouldn't be doing. You really shouldn't have, because what happens there is they just have to get one password to get into your computer. Now they've got access to pretty much everything you do. If you save your password for your bank account, for your PayPal account, for your almost anything else, your Amazon Prime, all of your customers' information. I know it's easy, but it's something you shouldn't do. Also, not only should you not save passwords, you should be changing your passwords on a pretty regular basis, because it's amazing with repetition, you become more and more exposed to the cyber threat, because they're watching the emails that you're sending out, they're watching the activity, they're watching who you're communicating with. It used to be, it was maybe once a month I would get an email that looked somewhat suspicious. Now it's probably once a day. So yeah, the idea of, I know it's easy and I know it's convenient, but it's something you really shouldn't be doing.
Right, and there are some apps out there that you can use, that you can store your passwords in, that are encrypted.
Right.
So that's probably a good thing to look at, especially if you got lots of them. I mean, who knows? You named a few of them, but I wouldn't be surprised even if I had probably 50 or more. Every little account that I've had since I was 25 years old, which was only like 5 years ago. So, but anyway, so no, that's good. And regarding the Epley, the one thing I think a lot of people, or just what you said, including myself, that a lot of those Epley coverages might be covered on your general policy. So that's something we'll probably really want to look at. But the big thing for me is I might have to take a look at this, because I'm not sure if you noticed during this webinar, but I suffered mental anguish, I believe. The fire alarm went off right in the middle of your presentation. So I checked off for a second. I put a little note in there. So, we had the fire alarm. But anyway, it's a first. So, hey, everybody, guess what? You have actually been to a webinar where the host had a fire alarm. But here we are. We're good. Now, if we'd have been in person, it would have been a different story. We would have had to all leave and get out, but it worked out pretty good. So, but and the only other thing I think I want to say thanks again for the chamber choice option. So if anybody has any questions, you could either give me a buzz, or you can get a hold of Al, who is a Penn National rep, of course. And so a lot of people don't realize that that's available, and we'll get that word out a little bit more. So, but Al, I don't see any more questions at this point. Any closing comments?
Just again, Brian and Amy, thanks so much for allowing me the time to put on this webinar. And just that if anybody has any questions, Brian, if you'd share my contact information with them, or feel free to give me a call. Be happy to discuss anything we went over here, or anything else related to cyber liability and employment practices, or the Chamber Choice Program.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is we'll send an email out to everybody with that information, so they'll all have it, and then we'll go from there. But thanks again, Al. We really appreciate it for sponsoring through DeLucia and DeZomba Insurance Agency for today's webinar. Thanks everybody for attending. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. So stay well, my friends, and have a great day.